Hey, Pete, have you ever been fascinated by the allure of secret societies throughout history?
Are you kidding me right now, Andy? I live for this stuff. From the Freemasons to the Illuminati, I am obsessed with these clandestine groups. The Rosicrucians and their ancient wisdom, the Skull and Bones Society at Yale with its powerful alumni network. I'm drawn to them. There's something about how they offer this exclusive access to hidden knowledge. They totally capture my imagination. It's like they give this sense of belonging to something greater than oneself.
Wow, sounds like you're looking for one yourself.
Do you even need to ask? Where do I sign? How much blood do I have to give? Are there any required tattoos or brands involved? Is it my first or second born that they need?
Well, what if I told you that there's a secret society for film lovers right here at the Next Reel family of film podcasts, all proud members of the True Story FM network, and you don't have to give any blood or either of your kids?
You've got my attention, Andy. What can you tell me about this cinematic brotherhood?
When you become a member of the Next Reel family, you gain access to a treasure trove of exclusive content, early episode releases, and a community of passionate film enthusiasts who share your love for movies. It's like being initiated into a secret order where you're privy to the inner workings of our shows, including the Next Reel, the Film Board, Movies We Like, Sitting in the Dark, and CinemaScope.
But Andy, as a member, will I unlock a world of bonus content from extended conversations and behind-the-scenes insights to exclusive pre-show and post-show discussions that expand the conversations about the films we love?
Why, yes, the true power of this secret society lies in its community. As a member, you'll join an exclusive group within our Discord community where you can engage in clandestine conversations with other passionate film fans in our members-only channels.
But what about live recordings, Andy? The sacred rituals of any good cinematic order. Will these episodes be scheduled in advance so that members like me will know when to gather around the virtual pyre in real time via YouTube?
Ah, yes. Perhaps the greatest secret of all is that by becoming a member, you're not just investing in your own entertainment, you're also supporting the tireless work of our independent creators and helping to keep the magic of cinema alive and well. So if you're ready to join this elite group of film lovers and unlock the secrets of cinema, head over to truestory.fm/join. For just $5 a month or $55 a year, you will gain access to a world of exclusive content, engaging discussions, and a community that shares your passion for movies. Head to truestory.fm/join to sign up.
Andy, I can't wait for you to welcome me into the inner circle of the Next Reel family of film podcasts. I'll see you in the secret chambers. Now, when do I get my ring?
Well, we don't actually offer rings with your membership.
Tattoos or brands? When can I do that?
No tattoos.
Secret handshakes?
Tell you what, you and I can come up with our own secret handshake, okay?
No, I mean, at the very least.
Before we dive in, here's another show you can enjoy in the True Story FM family of entertainment podcasts.
Horror movies get a bad rap. They're cheap thrills, mindless gore, not cinema, blah, blah, blah.
But we here at Sitting in the Dark know better. We know that horror is more than just jump scares and chainsaws. It's a reflection of our deepest fears, our anxieties, Okay, and there's a lot of jump scares and chainsaws.
Join us, Pete Wright, Tommy Metz III, Kyle Olson, and Keenan Diaz, as we cut into the dark heart of horror cinema.
Every episode, we explore a different facet of the genre, from survival horror to home invasions, from zombies to birds. We tickle the tropes, analyze the angles, and sharpen our own axes along the way.
We'll introduce you to the classics that shaped the genre.
And the modern masterpieces that are pushing the boundaries of terror.
Sitting in the Dark is your guide to navigating the terrifying, thrilling, and sometimes hilariously bad world of horror movies.
We'll help you understand why we love to be scared.
And maybe even convert you into a horror fan yourself.
So turn off the lights, close the basement door,
and join us.
Sitting in the dark.
In a world where podcasts are a dime a dozen, one show dares to stand out from the rest.
The Film Board, a podcast unafraid to tell it like it is.
We're here for one reason and one reason only: downloads.
That's right. We review new release movies because that's what gets people's attention.
But just because we're in it for the clicks doesn't mean we don't take our job seriously.
We're part of the Next Reel family of film podcasts, and we're proud of it.
Our reviews are just as insightful and thought-provoking as any of our other film podcasts.
It's just that this podcast is all about that sweet, sweet SEO.
The nectar squoze from the tree of Bing.
We're only human, but we're also creators.
And creators eat clicks to survive.
So if you want honest, unfiltered opinions on the very latest movies right on opening weekend,
delivered with the self-awareness of a team looking for downloads,
then tune in to the Film Board,
where every download counts, but yours counts the most.
Welcome to Movies We Like, part of the True Story FM Entertainment Podcast Network. I'm Andy Nelson, and that over there is Pete Wright.
It is Pete Wright over here.
On today's episode, we have invited screenwriter James Handel to talk about Black Narcissus, the movie he likes. James, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me. I think it would be fair to say that I like Black Narcissus.
Good.
Okay, and that's where the line is drawn. Okay, the enthusiasm bar has been set.
It has. I could use other words, but I'm going to stay in keeping with the spirit of the podcast.
Okay.
Excellent. Okay, this is going to be exciting. That's a good tease, though, because we're going to not talk about Black Narcissus yet. Let's talk a little bit about you and your career working in writing and just kind of getting started. The decision to pick up the pen, as it were, and actually start putting stories to page. And how did the journey to specifically focus on screenwriting start for you?
The funny thing is, that was actually an accident.
Okay.
I was doing an MA in philosophy at the time, but I was also trying to write a novel. That didn't go anywhere, but a friend of mine, a director by the name of Julian Richards, who was the director of my first movie, the last horror movie, said, "Why don't you write a screenplay for me?" He had an idea, which I'll mention in passing. It was a horror movie about. I'm almost embarrassed to say this. His idea was it was a horror movie about a pair of lesbians with a vampire fixation.
The lesbians were not lesbian vampires. They were fixated on vampires.
They weren't vampires, but they were thus fixated. And you may well ask what business a man had writing such a movie, but these things didn't occur to me at that young age. And so I got a copy of Sid Field's screenplay, and I 3-act structure, blah blah blah. So I wrote a script, which I hope no copy of exists anywhere at this point. But that was my introduction to this crazy business.
I got to ask, what was it called?
It had a number of names. But I think I'm going to go with the name that Julian wanted for it, which was Lesbian Vampire Killers.
which is funny because there is a movie, Lesbian Vampire Killers, that is out there.
There is.
Yeah.
It's not that movie. Is that what you're saying?
No, it's not that movie. to the best of my knowledge, nobody ever made it, which I think is a good thing. But that was its working title at the time.
Gotcha.
Outstanding. So what takes you from, I'm trying to write a novel. Okay, I wrote Lesbian Vampire Killers. Maybe I think I want to do more of this thing.
Just in terms of writing itself, I had wanted to write because one has ideas about sort of creating stuff and expressing stuff, and one can get a bit pretentious about that. But I think for a lot of people who take this seriously, certainly in my own case, I regard writing as kind of a pathology, really. In many ways, it's really bad for one's mental health, but hopefully you produce some interesting work that people can enjoy, and one just has a compulsion to keep doing it. So I think it was a path I was set on in some form or other. I was also doing philosophy, which is another form of mental illness, and I I love movies like everybody else or like most other people. And I mean, it's just an inherently exciting and captivating form. So, once I started, I was hooked like we all are.
Yeah. So from that point, what brought you, and then, working with Julian to actually get the last horror movie, which it looks, according to IMDb, is the first produced screenplay for you.
That's right. Well, I mean, that was a funny story as well, because so that was an original idea of Julian's. I don't know if you've seen it. I've
seen it. Yeah. Pete,
you have?
Pete has it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I haven't seen it, but I've seen The Hoarder, so we're going to talk about that too.
So Last Horror Movie, it had this sort of big twist in it, but it's 22 years old now, so it's probably safe to talk about it. But it's basically it starts off like a conventional sort of video horror movie that you would find in video stores when they still existed, and you sit down to watch it, and then it cuts to what appears to be someone having taped over the horror video that you hired, and what follows is what appears to be found footage of the video diary of a serial killer, and he takes you on this video diary of his horrible exploits. But at the same time, it's meant to be a sort of meditation on good and evil, and there's a gimmick at the end, which I think I can say now, partly because it's a long time ago, and also because it worked for the video format, but not for sort of streaming. And that is that at the end of the movie, the killer says, "What I've been doing is I've been putting this video in video stores, and whenever anybody hires it, I follow them home, and whoever that is, that's the next victim. That's the next.
Okay.
That each person that you've seen on this video, they all hired this film, and you're next."
Right.
Okay.
So at the time, it was this clever gimmick. Doesn't work quite so well with screen.
Totally dated,
Exactly.
right? Yeah. It's kind of a museum piece.
The nature of video stores, right?
early.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you're going to get any satisfaction out of it, you'd have to watch it as this thing that would have been clever at the time.
Yeah.
If it was clever.
Right. Through
Yeah.
those eyes. Yeah.
I think I find it so interesting to hear you were working through philosophy, your philosophy program, and you end up making the last horror movie, and some years later, obviously, The Hoarder. How are you channeling your academic exploits through genre?
Well, that's a good question. Because The Hoarder, not so much. We'll talk about that in a second, but certainly what we hoped to do with Last Horror was to create some genuine moral discomfort. And that, number one, to present somebody doing terrible things who has a rationale for what they're doing, not that it's necessarily justified, but to try and give the audience an argument that at least is something they can contend with, and also to suggest complicity on the part of the audience, that they're continuing to watch it, so in that sense they're morally complicit. I mean, this was terrain that was explored in Man Bites Dog, as you know.
Sure, yeah.
But the departure that we were aiming for with this particular film was in a lot of these serial killer sort of meditation type movies, Peeping Tom, obviously, we're going to talk about Powell and Pressburger, but also Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer, Man Bites Dog, etc. Generally, the killer is almost always a fascinating and complex character, but they don't really have a moral awareness of what they're doing. You're watching sort of the fascinating creature do the terrible things, and you, the audience, get to make judgments based on the application of your moral system onto this character. And what we wanted with our character Max in Last Horror was to have a character that was sufficiently morally self-aware, so he recognizes that what he's doing is wrong by any normal standards. He says he wants to keep doing it, and he's constantly challenging the audience to explain why they're right and he's wrong. And it's not the suggestion that everything is subjective. Certainly I would say, and I think the movie also says that ultimately, or the movie leaves open the possibility that we can say of Max, you are in fact wrong. But what he's saying is, look, from where I'm standing, I haven't heard a good enough argument to say why I shouldn't be doing these things, because at the end of the day, the fundamental principle that you shouldn't go around killing people, which you shouldn't, although fundamentally true, is impossible to prove. And that is the sort of, you asked about philosophy, right?
This is exactly what I wanted here.
Okay, so it's not the view that it's all subjective. It's the view that the individual, from the moral position they're operating from, and at the level of fundamental principle, rather than sort of testing whether their view is consistent with some other principle that they also hold. The idea is that if you've got a disagreement at the fundamental level, the person in that position is epistemically, is in terms of knowledge that is available to them, they're closed off from your position. That guy doesn't get why it's bad. And if they don't get why it's bad and they want to do it, from his point of view, why shouldn't he keep doing it? Why shouldn't he keep doing it? And we don't actually have a conclusive argument. We can still say they're wrong, but we can't prove it to them. So that was how, when that idea was pitched to me, it seemed to me there was a really interesting thing that was there to be done with that subgenre of horror, which actually hadn't been done before. And not that I'm aware of anyway. There hadn't at the time that I was aware of been a serial killer figure as morally self-aware as we made that guy. So that's what I found philosophically interesting about that one.
I think it's particularly interesting to hear you describe that experience, and then here we are 20 years later, and without spoiling it, the trouble with Jessica is that thesis writ large outside of genre, and it's sort of a magnificent magnum opus of everything you just described. I couldn't celebrate that any better.
Well, you're very kind.
Yeah, it's like I think Mike White has kind of cornered the market on cringe social horror, and I think you are absolutely swimming in the deep end of that pool with this. There are moments in The Trouble with Jessica, and I want to get back up to what was different about The Hoarder, but there are moments in The Trouble with Jessica that make me just itchy in my seat, the way the dynamics play out.
I mean, I'm glad to hear that, because that was precisely the point. I mean, how can we test people's conceptions of good and bad generally, and their
moral
own
self-awareness?
Exactly.
Yeah. So, okay. I'm sorry about that. So, Andy, I'm hijacking all of this, and I'm sorry to do that.
It's a great way to kind of lead in. Let's just kind of move into The Hoarder, which is before you get to The Trouble with Jessica, because again, in this particular case with The Hoarder, you're now also working with Matt Winn, who you will go on to work on with Trouble with Jessica as well. So as far as like, how did that project get started, and then start developing this working relationship that you would end up growing with Matt?
Actually, I got involved with Matt. We were introduced by our agent at the time, quite a long, about, I think maybe 4 or 5 years before we worked on The Hoarder together. I mean, we've done a bunch of scripts together that never came to pass, as is often the case. The Hoarder was one that he had developed before he met me, with a couple of producers who were ultimately the producers on the movie. I forget what year it was exactly. I think it must have been around sort of 2011 or something like that. And they invited me to do a rewrite of a script that was already highly developed. But we made quite a few changes. I don't remember too much actually about the original script, but it was. I think it's a different animal in the sense that it's it never wanted to be much more than a conventional horror movie. I mean, there's a great idea at the heart of it, which is people trapped in a storage facility. It's got the elements of, a bunch of people thrown together and trapped in a confined environment. It's got a creature that is chasing them, but ultimately has a kind of sort of pathos to it. Yeah, I mean, that was very much a rewrite job for me. Sort of come in, polish the script, not just polish the script, but sort of improve sort of certain structural elements. The nice thing about Matt is he always invites me to the set, which, as I'm sure you know, writers are almost never allowed on the set.
Right, yeah.
Right.
But he's very, he's generous and, a great collaborator. So, it was fun to sort of hang around on the set and watch the creature chase our victims around.
Well, it's a wonderful creature design for sure, but I totally see what you're saying about it being kind of straight across the bow horror. And
yeah,
I'm curious your experience, and you could talk about the last horror movie in this context too, but your experience, transitioning from what you envision when you're putting it on the page to the final product on screen, right? Do you feel like both of these movies line up to your intention as, the writer?
Well, I mean, look, it's always, when you work in film and you're a writer and you're not the director, I don't really have ambitions to be a director. I mean, it's something you think about. But again, I think it gets very personal. I find it very hard to write for the screen without imagining what's going to be on the screen. So I always have quite specific visual ideas. So when I write a thing, I can normally see the whole thing in my mind. Sometimes I write plans out so that I can imagine the room or the environment, or because I actually imagine the blocking in my head. But that's just me. I mean, in the case of Last Horror, a lot of which was sort of just found footage and shot verite style. I mean, we made it for £10,000. The Last Horror movie.
Jeez, wow.
That was an extraordinary. There was an extraordinary effort by everybody because we just went and did it. There was a. I mean, it wasn't a big crew, but there was a crew, and it was a professional operation. But that we were finding locations with Last Horror. I mean, just in terms of sort of realized vision. Julian and I spent a lot of time interviewing actors, and in particular the main, the lead, Kevin Howarth, who I think just gives an extraordinary performance. He's a brilliant actor, and we interviewed dozens of people, and none of them we felt were quite right. And then Julian had an actor that he was leaning to, and I didn't think he was right. And there was one that I was leaning to, and he didn't think he was right. And then along came Kevin, and Julian gave me a call and said, "We've got him." And I ran over to his house and looked at the audition footage, and that was it. We found him. So sometimes the right version just comes along independent of your will, and you sort of have to accept that. But in general, I think some people are more, some people sort of relinquish control easily, and some people, they want to see precisely their thing, their own vision realized. But when you're writing, you even if that's required to generate the script, obviously you have to give it up, because somebody's going to come and direct it, and locations are going to be found, and actors are going to. That's another thing. I always imagine the actors never quite say the lines the way that I imagine them to be said, but I mean, it's their job to imagine it the way they're going to do it. So that's the point.
Yeah. The actual Hoarder, the image of what they're doing, whose was that? Was that in your head? I got it out.
No, No, definitely not mine. I mean, it was always this creature with a sewn up mouth, but that was in the script before I got to it.
Okay. Fair. That's fair. Yeah. We don't need to relitigate it. I just had to know, like, that was pretty good. That's pretty good.
Yeah. That was a great idea.
Yeah.
Obviously, like some working relationships with the people that who have been making these films. I mean, it sounds like Julian really included you in, I mean, to the point where like you were looking at casting tapes and stuff, with which not often screenwriters get that access.
That's right.
Going to the sets. I mean, I don't know if you were also doing on-set rewrites, things like that, but I mean, you definitely had a level of involvement that I think a lot of screenwriters probably would find envious, that you're getting to kind of be participating in these ways. When it comes to The Trouble with Jessica, let's kind of shift our attention to that one now. This is the one that's going to be opening soon in theaters. And again, you worked with Matt on this one, and it looks like in both cases, I mean, I'm guessing that with The Hoarder, he had kind of collaborated on the initial script and then you kind of took it over from there. In this particular script, did the two of you collaborate on the script, or was it his idea and you kind of developed it? How did the process of this script come to fruition?
It had a lot of conceptual and emotional progenitors. So we were thinking, number one, it was a collaboration from the start. That's for sure. We were trying to do a lot of things. We wanted to write a script that we knew we could shoot. At the time, we were thinking of it turned out to be a bigger budget production than we originally envisaged, but we wanted to write something that we could, if necessary, make very cheaply. So, as you know, it's mostly in one location. So there was that. We're also interested and had been interested for some time in certain anxieties that ran through the British middle class. Obviously, it's a film about middle class people, and it's a social category that the British often sort of don't pay much attention to or shy away from. You get lots of movies about sort of working class people. You get movies about, should we say, period toffs, and TV shows about period toffs, but you don't really get that much on sort of the aspirant middle class the way you do in America. And it had always struck us as sort of rich terrain. So we knew we wanted to do something about that. And we were also interested in sort of the economic anxiety that was very, sort of post-crash of 2008. There was a lot of people that had got used to sort of a degree of sort of success and affluence and financial security that were now sort of facing ruin. So that was a theme that interested us. And we also had sort of, our own personal experiences with people that had committed suicide. Matt certainly talked about someone close to him that had committed suicide. I've known people that have committed suicide, and it is a very, there's a lot of things you can say about it, but it's emotionally rich, not to say explosive terrain. And exactly at this point, I can't remember exactly how it came into the mix, along with all the ideas that were swirling together. But I think we were developing the idea of a sort of dinner party, and then the idea that one of the main characters would commit suicide and create this problem for the main characters, which is simultaneously you might think mundane. So you've got the value of the fundamental dilemma is that the main character, the Jessica character, commits suicide when the two hosts got into desperate financial trouble and are trying to sell their house.
Right.
And they find themselves in a position where they're worried that the sale of their home will be jeopardized if Jessica is found at that house. So they hatched this idea to transport her body to her own place and make it look as if she's committed suicide there, which is, it's sort of an absurd. There's an absurdity there. It's of course, not the right thing to do, but they find themselves in a bind. And we were interested in this sort of water cooler moment where, people would say, if you were in their position, what would you do? So and in that sense, we're back, back to, not exactly back to last horror, but, once again, uncomfortable moral dilemmas, and that challenge our conception of who we actually are.
That, I think, is the thing that gives the movie for me such delight, which is you take something that's very, very serious and sobering, and in the process you make me laugh around it. Right? It's not like there's a shortage of grief, but this movie is a real emotional roller coaster as it moves from, something gritty and real to, a dash of Weekend at Bernie's to, we get actual laugh moments that do make me question, what would I do? And however you landed such a stacked cast for this intimate piece is extraordinary. Mostly, for crying out loud, Sewell and Tudyk are as charismatic as they come in terms of our, principal male leads, and Moaning Myrtle. Every time I see her, Shirley Henderson, it's just a delight.
It's right. You're right. It's not just that we landed them. It's not just that somehow, and obviously, it's an independent movie trying to get not only the sort of sufficient critical mass in the financing, but also in the casting. As when you've got nobody, it's hard to get anybody. But when you've got somebody, then the others come. But so we had this. Olivia Williams. She just burns up the screen, right? In those scenes, she is an incredible performance. And Indira Varma. The 5 leads are. It's not just that we got them, though. It's the performances that they delivered.
Yes,
just extraordinary. Lucky old us, really.
Yeah.
They play off of each other well throughout the film, and I think, to your point about the dilemmas, what I think is fascinating about it is it does make you think about these questions, like, is it wrong to just move them to a different place and say that's where they died? They're already dead. You're not actually causing any additional damage that hasn't already been done. It puts these questions out there that I honestly hadn't really thought about before, and it's interesting. And then the other question that my wife and I were debating afterward: would we buy a house if we just found out that somebody had killed themselves there? And my wife's response was, well, it was the backyard, it wasn't in the house.
Right. Okay. Andy, I think that's a really good point, because, sometimes these movies, these kinds of movies can sort of go off a cliff when it comes to just sort of believability. And you put some sort of, as soon as the billionaire comes and wants to look at the house in the middle of the night, I found myself wondering, why do I believe this? Well, first of all, he's just fantastic, right? And second,
right, he's God, that actor was good.
God, he's so good,
so good.
Such a face, and the fact that he comes in with that level of ego makes that entire swing, which could come off as a lampoon, absolutely grounded and believable. So to your point, lucky old you, that was a fantastic grounding element that raised the level of threat. There wasn't anything in this movie that I thought, oh my goodness, well, now suddenly I'm out of it. Now suddenly I'm questioning credulity of the narrative. I was in it for the humor and the grief the entire time. I thought it was just really, really wonderful.
We wanted the moral dilemmas, and we needed a situation that would test those questions precisely. If we couldn't make them do something that was too bad. So we couldn't have them kill Jessica, or we couldn't have, I mean, they weren't motivated to, but we couldn't have a situation in which they would do something that bad. So we wanted the bad thing that they would have to do to have to compete with the harm that they would suffer if they just played it straight and called the police. And we wanted a situation where anyone in that situation would at least have to question what they would do because of what the cost would be to them, and and whether people are capable of being honest with themselves. And then we created further problems where the other characters became drawn in ways that they couldn't get out of. So we trapped them into having to become complicit. And then we wove that in with these sort of Ealing comedy sort of farcical elements with the neighbor and the police and
so rude.
I know. and that in itself has a sort of subversive effect, because even as you're trying to wrestle with these difficult moral questions, you've just got sheer absurdity intruding and making it hard to arrive at a sort of stable view of what you would like to think. So that was the idea.
Did you ever at any point consider Jessica's death being an accident? She slips on some clafouti or something and kills herself.
You end up thinking about so many possibilities that I can't rule out, funnily. I mean, I can't remember and I can't rule out that might have been something we thought about. But I think that we settled, once the idea occurred to us, we settled quite quickly on the suicide idea because it's so resonant.
Well, certainly the right idea for the film, and because it absolutely cements their relationships as old friends, complicated histories. I think you brought up Ealing comedy, and the first thing I thought was, okay, we could make this whole thing a farce, but suicide wouldn't fit.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well played.
Definitely a fun movie. People should check it out when it's in theaters. But I think right now, let's shift our attention and start talking about Powell and Pressburger's Black Narcissus. Quite the film from this pair of directors I've seen far too few of their films. I need to definitely jump in and watch more of their filmography because I've always enjoyed the ones that I've seen. Well, I mean, I guess just starting there, Powell and Pressburger, what's your experience with them as their filmmakers and their body of work?
As a child, I remember seeing Colonel Blimp and Black Narcissus and A Matter of Life and Death. So they showed up on the TV, and then later on, I haven't seen all of their work. What else have I seen? Canterbury Tale, The Red Shoes, Tales of Hoffman,
Peeping Tom you had mentioned earlier,
and Peeping Tom.
Yeah.
I think that's all the ones I've seen. So really, at some point I should go and look at some of the early work as well. But I mean, I remember when I saw Black Narcissus in particular, I just remember. I mean, when you watch it as a child, you're just, the first thing you are is just blown away by just what it looks like. I mean, there isn't really another film that looks like Black Narcissus. I mean, yes, by some measure, they are the most visually creative of British filmmakers that I can think of. I mean, there are great British filmmakers like Lean, etc., but none with the sort of sheer visual chutzpah and hubris of those two, and the emotional intensity, which again, as a child, you don't really understand, but you feel it. So I just remember thinking, I don't know if you're allowed to swear on this podcast, but
sure.
I mean, just sort of, what the fuck was that? What did I just see?
Yeah.
Was just the, and then you move on to other things, but it just kept coming back. I mean, I forget how many times I've seen it at this point. Quite a few times over the years. I think I come back to it every 5 years or so, and I watched it again for this, just because every time it just blows me away.
Well, I mean, you talked about the look, and I think that chutzpah that these filmmakers bring to films like this. I mean, choosing to shoot a story like this all on the backlot, essentially, and sound stages and everything, never going out of the country, just like figure out, like, let's just paint everything. Let's just do these beautiful matte paintings, these large scale landscape paintings that they would put up and kind of craft this thing. And you see the before and after, like, set photos of the bell on the cliff and how beautiful
you mean
it looks
Chekhov's
in the film.
cliff?
Like that fantastic green,
So
lush green valley below, but then before, where it's just like the concrete of the back lot, like where they're actually filming. It's fascinating, but to your point, like the way that those paintings kind of give it this sense of not reality, like we're in this other space that maybe this is kind of what being this close to heaven actually feels like. Who knows? And then the way the colors just kind of explode. And I think about that with something like The Red Shoes, where it's just like they're using Technicolor in a way where, I mean, it is really Technicolor. Like the colors are just popping off the screen. And here, man, when Sister Ruth puts on that lipstick, I don't know if I have seen lipstick like explode off the screen like that before, right? I'm just like, that is lipstick. Like that is really getting dolled up. I mean, it's intense. They make it, the colors just feel intense.
It is incontestably lipstick. I mean, as I'm sure you know, Powell made the decision from the start to shoot almost all of the film in its entirety in the studio. There are some scenes that were shot at some tropical gardens
right, yeah.
in Britain. But the idea was that he wanted to control absolutely every shot, and the result is that I don't think there's a single shot in that film that isn't just beautiful to look at, and not just beautiful, but expressive of theme and just extremely powerful. But the irony is that it's a film that's all about loss of control. Here's a film that was made with absolute control and attention to detail, nothing left to chance. And Powell often made films on location and used location extremely adeptly. And here is a film that is set in sort of an exotic country, and you might think, well, go off and shoot in India, even if it's practically hard to do so, and that was a consideration. But you might think, go off and do a Coppola in the jungle or something like that. But what he wanted was he wanted the method of filmmaking to involve complete control about a theme, about a film whose main theme, I would say, it's about so many things, but what it really is about failure of control, the human need to bring order and or control to reality, and reality always outmatches the humans.
It is more interesting. Part of why we do this show is to talk to creators and creatives about what inspires them. I don't think I had a good bead on why you would pick this movie because I hadn't seen it before. Then I watched it and hear your background and hear what we've been talking about Jessica and horror movie. And suddenly isolation and madness and moral and religious repression and forbidden desire and identity and good God renunciation, like all of those things seem to be right in your strike zone. How does that inspiration strike you when you watch a movie like this as a creator?
I think when you encounter art at its absolute finest, there are any number of films I could have picked to talk about with you, and I don't have a single favorite film, But but I thought, what's a film that maybe not that many people know about? I mean, I don't know how many people. I mean, cineasts are obviously all know about this one, but I think a lot of sort of, I suspect a lot of, reasonably familiar cinema goers maybe don't know about it. So, I mean, to answer your question about how does the inspiration strike you? So I think that when you come across art at its absolute finest, which I think this is, I mean, it strikes you in so many different ways. I think what art at its finest does is it hits you on so many levels that sort of full spectrum experience of being blown away. That the fact you're aware of how many levels that it's working on, but as you're watching it, you have to keep sort of abstracting and saying, oh, all right, they just did that. But the main thing is you're just left with an impression, which afterwards you have to deconstruct, and you return to the you alternate between the impression and the deconstruction and the analysis, and then you appreciate it, and then you think, well, that's I'll try and do something.
Yeah, right. That's it. Like sometimes lightning strikes, and I think, okay, I just watched a movie that's transformative. Now I'm going to go write one.
Yeah,
and find my voice in that, which is extraordinary.
And one gravitates towards themes, and I mean, you're quite right. Reality busting out of the categories by which we try to make sense of the world. That's just always been a theme of interest to me. I mean, it's almost certainly why I did philosophy as well. So yes, just another pathology.
I mean, it's such a fascinating film in the way that it's exploring, this group of sisters in this foreign world that they are clearly not prepared for. So they're stepping into a place that they already are unfamiliar with. They are like at the top of the Himalayas in a place where things are affecting the way people are thinking. Is it the altitude? Is it the water? Is it what they're eating? Something is happening because they're all starting to kind of there's different ways that they're all reacting up here. And then they've got this sense of the connection to their past. We're getting a sense of the draw that they're continuing, like the recollections of the life before the sisterhood, what they had, kind of the earthly connections, we'll say. And here they are in a location that is like next to the heavens. It's like as close to what they're working for, like their boss, right? They're at their boss's foyer, essentially, way up here. And you get this sense of this kind of like breaking point where these women are just not sure how to move forward anymore. They want to work toward this greatness, this closeness with God that is part of the church, but they keep getting drawn to these other earthly delights, I guess we could just say. It's such a fascinating exploration, and it's brilliant in the way that it's executed, and to the point where I as I was reading about it, no surprise, I suppose, but the Legion of Decency, of course, condemned it, and all of the depictions that it had, and they had to make Powell and Pressburger had to make cuts to it in order for the film to play here in the States.
That's right.
It's such a fascinating look at just humanity, and that's what I find so interesting in a story about a group of nuns.
Yeah, I mean, it's I'm not the first person to say this, but the pitch for this movie is just hilarious to think about in the modern context. A group of nuns attempt to start a convent in the Himalayas on the site of a former brothel.
Right.
Let's make a movie about that. But and I think the movie is often cast and was criticized at the time as a sensationalist sort of nunsploitation movie about how the nuns succumb to sexuality and that kind of thing. But I think it's after much larger themes. I mean, what it's really interested in. I mean, that is one component of an interest in the way that the way we try to make sense of the world, our moral sense of ourselves, but also the way in which we try to preserve a sense of sort of psychological identity, and that this is where the sort of the memory idea and the idea of madness enters the fray, and also all the different religious belief systems that are going on there. So you have the nuns, obviously. You have the Hindu religion. You have a kind of animism as well, so that the locals refer to the nearest mountain peak as the bear goddess, which calls to mind not Hinduism so much as a kind of animism. You have Mr. Dean, who represents sort of worldly atheism or agnosticism or nihilism even. And did I mention the holy man? I can't remember.
We didn't mention the holy man.
Okay,
Yeah.
So you've got all of this going on, sort of woven into this story, and I mean there are so many levels at which it operates. So obviously the nuns are trying to preserve their relationship with God as they see it, and their spirituality, and you have the two of the, I mean, aside from sexuality, the constant motif throughout the film is the wind and the altitude and the clarity of the air, and the wind just. I think the wind. There's this amazing scene with Sister Philippa, played by Flora Robson, and Sister Clodagh, who's the young Sister Superior. Sister Philippa says, I'm finding it hard to maintain my faith. My memories are intruding on me. And Sister Clodagh says to her, well, we must work. So we must preserve the asceticism and work ethic that keeps us sort of bound to our faith. And Sister Philippa, who's already, for reasons that she can't explain, populated what was supposed to be the vegetable gardens with flowers, because she's just sort of transported by, the aestheticism has supplanted her asceticism. And Sister Clodagh says, well, we must work, And Sister Philippa opens up her hands, and they're blistered with all the hard work that she's already done to try to do precisely what Sister Clodagh is telling her to do. And so this environment is just wreaking havoc on their sense of spirituality. But the film is operating conceptually and symbolically at so many levels to capture this sense of disintegration in the face of nature and reality. It's just operating, I think, at a much richer level than just nuns and sex, even though that's incontestably part of it.
Part of it, but in a sort of non-explicit way. Like Ken Russell came around and did that one, right?
He did.
and just leaned in on that part. I guess maybe he thought that was missing from this movie. But it's it's ostensibly the same thematic or symbolic story.
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting. I think with my sort of modern eyes, I expected it to be a more strident film than it is. It's actually quite elegant. It's written in a quite elegant way, and
yes.
It doesn't give me that sort of even though it's dealing with some difficult topics in and around the church, it doesn't ever feel like it's preaching at me or doing anything to be sort of dissonant to its relationship with the church. It feels authentic. I think that's a interesting thing coming out of Powell and Pressburger, that they're dealing in a cultural territory that feels foreign. This is no Red Shoes.
Yes, I mean, one of the reasons this is my favorite of their films, which, I mean, they made so many wonderful films, but with this one, the balance between expressionism and aestheticism and sheer artifice, and just hard psychological reality, is the balance between the two is about as perfect as you can make it. And I mean, in terms of what you said, sort of how strident it is or how restrained it is, I mean, to some degree, I think it's an expression of its time. You wonder how they would have made it now if they'd existed now. But in a way, the clash of sensibilities that produced that film probably just wouldn't exist now anyway.
That's a great point. I think it's a clash of sensibilities. I think that's the thing that makes it feel of its time. I think you're right. I don't think it would be made, certainly not this way, this sort of gently, I'll say it. But I also think the norms have changed enough that there is no movie. It's like making a movie about a video rental store.
I mean, it's interesting to think, isn't it? Because I wouldn't use the term gentle perhaps so much as restraint. So
yeah,
and what they don't show us. So even when Sister Ruth has transformed into what is they're using full horror themes there at that point in the movie. I mean, she's like there's this, you may remember, there's an extraordinary shot. It only lasts about a second when late in the movie, when Sister Ruth's about stalking Sister Clodagh in the monastery, she wants to kill her, and there's this moment where Sister Clodagh turns, she's in the chapel and she turns around, and you get this flash of Sister Ruth running up the stairs. She looks like Gollum.
She does, yes.
I mean that quite literally, sort of crouched over, and the tropes that they do allow themselves to use, and what they don't show, which you might be tempted to do in a contemporary film. I mean, that's what the power of that film consists in. I found myself, as you mentioned that, trying to think of whether there are any modern films that use restraint in that way. I mean, one example that comes to mind, although it's very, very different, is Haneke, who accomplishes a lot by not showing us things. So I think those moves are there for the modern filmmaker, but it's still, you'd still never do it the way they did it, because that was the world that they inhabited then.
Yeah, and specifically chose to craft this in a way because of what they saw it kind of representing for this particular story. Just to point out, there was a miniseries version of Black Narcissus made just 5 years ago, 3 episodes that ran on BBC and FX that I don't think was received very well. I think
I never saw it.
I haven't seen it. I just know that it's out there, and that unlike this, I think that they were working on filming more realistically, and I just feel like perhaps they might have. I haven't looked at the original novel that this was based on. Perhaps they were closer to the novel. I'm not sure, but it's hard to imagine retelling this story when this version exists.
Yeah, I mean, why would you? I suppose.
Yeah,
I mean, I think it's interesting what you said about the church. I don't think the film is particularly unsympathetic to the church in particular.
No. I think in the 1940s, I can see why the church would think so. Today, I don't think. I mean, obviously, they're not banning it at this particular point in time.
I mean, there's a clue to that in the early scene with the Reverend Mother and Sister Clodagh, and the Reverend Mother says that she doesn't think she's ready. The Reverend Mother is in many ways endorsing what the film is saying, which is that, one of the interesting things about Clodagh is she's a willful and hubristic character, throughout the film, and including in the flashbacks to her life before she was a nun. We see her as very, as strong and willful, and in some ways that you're not meant to be that if you're the servant of God. So in some ways, Clodagh is herself a flawed expression of what she's meant to be as a servant of God, and that's actually pointed out. It's hinted at right at the beginning of the film.
Yeah, and it's interesting because it feels like there are points, the way that Deborah Kerr plays it, that there's this internal struggle of her trying to performatively be this sister superior the way that she thinks that a sister superior should be, but at conflict with her own way that she just wants things to be running. And you get this sense that she can't quite reconcile the two with her own desires, but then also the way that she thinks that how she's supposed to be as this leader of this team that's up here, in a position where it's pointed out, like you said, she likely isn't ready. She's younger than normal for a sister superior, like things like that really make her stand out as somebody who's stepping into some pretty big shoes and seems to not be ready for them.
That's right. And isn't her performance amazing when which she does entirely with her face, when the Reverend Mother says, "You've been chosen," and whilst hardly moving any of her face at all, any of her physiognomy, you see a range of emotions from surprise, pride, trepidation. You see a whole range of emotions go through her face whilst barely doing anything. It's an extraordinary piece of acting.
Yeah,
it's one of the great successes of the movie, I think. And what makes me nervous about a 3-part extravaganza that this movie communicates repression so effectively without overt exposition. How do you not have overt exposition if you jam it into 3 parts?
Exactly.
This movie's tidy.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a stunning film. I mean, Jack Cardiff, we've talked about him on the show. The way that he uses the Technicolor, again, with this team, is just, top-notch cinematography work. Especially, Jack Cardiff is known as the guy who would go and shoot fantastic on-location things with John Huston and stuff. And so here he is doing this studio shoot and just making it explode with vibrancy and power through the colors that he's capturing.
Yeah, he certainly deserved that Oscar.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Yeah, it's a fantastic film. Thanks so much for bringing it here to the show for us to discuss. We really appreciate it, and I'm glad we had a chance to discuss it.
Thanks for having me. It's nice to have this film talked about.
For sure.
Yeah. Do you have anything that you want to plug other than Trouble with Jessica? Any other projects in the pipelines?
Yeah, we're working on. Matt and I are again. We have a new project which we're trying to get shot this year. It has come. I think it was reported in Deadline. So Steve Coogan's attached.
Fantastic.
It's another tale about ambiguous morality. It's about an unscrupulous, extremely successful PR guru who washes the reputations of very powerful corporations and dictators, and the worst people in the world come to him to have their reputations sanitized, and he has a crisis of conscience when he gets a terminal diagnosis, and it's called The Good Life. So he tries to be a better person, but there's I can't say what exactly, but it gets transformed from that straightforward morality journey. There's a twist in the story that makes everything much more complicated and difficult for him. So, hopefully that will be another fun, morally disturbing project for you all to enjoy, I hope.
Well, and Steve Coogan is the perfect person to do that.
We'll have to have you pick a second movie and come back and talk about it.
Fantastic. Well, James, once again, thank you so much for joining us here today on Movies We Like. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Well, thanks very much for having me, and great podcast.
Well, we'll get hopefully more people seeing Black Narcissus, checking it out, and people, again, go see The Trouble with Jessica when it hits theaters near you. And that's it for today. So for everyone else out there, we hope that you like the show, and we certainly hope you like the movie like we do here on Movies We Like. Movies We Like is a part of the True Story FM Entertainment Podcast Network and the Next Reel family of film podcasts. The music is Chonk Clap by Out of Flux. Find the show at truestory.fm and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Threads, and Letterboxd at The Next Reel. Learn about becoming a member at thenextreel.com/membership. And if your podcast app allows ratings and reviews, we always appreciate it if you drop one in there for us. See you next time.